Hey everyone, I was like just typing in the chat. I was gonna say everybody's rolling in. Should we give it another minute? And then here I am up on the screen. So my name is Erica Brown. Welcome to our third and last discussion about how to be an anti-racist by Ibram Kendi. My name is Erica. I work at Radio Kingston. I'm the mom of two amazing boys, native to Kingston, and I'm really happy to be here just to continue the discussion around anti-racism. 2020 has been a very charged year, and I have to say, over the last few weeks, I've actually experienced people trying and messing up to be anti-racist even more than I had, in the past, and that in itself just means that there's progress. And so I'm just very happy to be here. This Zoom's discussion will be recorded. There will be children walking in the background. We'll also be streaming this discussion to our YouTube channel, and the video is going to be saved and posted. YouTube channel, and it'll be saved and posted so that folks who couldn't be here tonight can actually watch it, and you can actually go back and watch it. If you don't want your voice, name, or image to be a part of the recording, we welcome you as a listener. So the speakers, anybody who speaks, anybody who has audio that comes through, their names, voices, and or images will appear on that recording. So tonight we will again use the chat feature so that you can participate more fully. When we invite folks to raise your digital hands and share responses to the discussion questions, and the chat opens up just another avenue for participant response. I love the chat personally, just saying. You'll see me all over it. And for this evening's discussion, you can choose to watch in gallery or speaker view. Because your mics are muted, when we open up the discussion for participation, please use the hand icon to get our attention and leave it up, and we'll make sure that we take it down once we get to address you. The location of the icon, it's a little bit different depending on your device. As I do this, I'm like trying to look on mine at the same time. But for most of us, if you click the participant icon at the bottom, you should be able to choose to raise your hand or to lower it. If you can't find that icon, just let us know in the chat box, and we'll either let you speak or somebody can direct you to where it is. We will be calling on participants after each of the questions, and if there's time at the end, we'll definitely open it back up for participation. And what we do is, if you do put it in something into the chat box, one of us will make sure that we address it. I'm going to pass it off to the wonderful Kathy.
Well, thank you. Hi, I'm Kathy Saletti. I am an assistant principal at Kingston High School. I'm here because we've been doing this work with Kingston High School, and we've been doing the work here in the community, and I just think it is important work that needs to be done. So we want to start by thanking Ibram Kendi, the author of How to Be Anti-Racist. We also want to thank Amanda and Anthony Stromoski, the co-owners of the Kingston bookstore Rough Draft Bar and Books, for continuing to support and promote Kingston Reads About Racism. We also want to thank Jimmy Buff and Radio Kingston for his support. We had a great show last Thursday night, after Jimmy, with permission from the publisher, was able to air the last chapter of the book. Thank you to our community participants, AJ Jordan, Amy White, and Donna Schlackman. They really added a whole lot to that. And thank you as well to Karen Levine, our great tech consultant. And thanks to all of you for showing up tonight. Next up is Amy.
Hi, my name is Amy Capus. I'm a school social worker at Kingston High School. I'm here tonight because I believe it is my personal and professional responsibility to do anti-racist work, and I'm happy to be here and doing it with all of you. We have a few community agreements that we're going to go through. Number one, please lead with a loving heart. That one is pretty self-explanatory. Two, please lean in and lean out. If you are someone who is quiet, put your hand up, take that risk with us. If you're a person who tends to dominate conversations, hold on to that digital hand and listen. Please use it, but please give others a chance who may not typically do so. Ouch and oops. If somebody says something that offends you, please speak up with an ouch. And for the person who has said something offensive, no matter what it was intended, please take ownership and responsibility. That's the oops. And then, of course, there is the apology that comes from the heart. Because this is a Zoom discussion, this may be us, the moderators, jumping in. And lastly, please land the plane. Be conscious of not dominating the conversation when it's your turn to speak, because others are waiting. We're going to go ahead to Charlotte.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks for those reminders, which brings us very organically to being mindful, right? To be mindful of the agreements, but also to be mindful of ourselves in this space. So again, I'm Charlotte Adamus. I am a retired Kingston City School District teacher, very proud member of the community. And so so honored to be here to do this work, to be part of the conversation. So I'd like to start off by grounding ourselves, to come into this space, to be present. And so let's take a moment to close our eyes or just gently gaze at the space in front of you and take a few deep breaths. So inhaling and lifting the spine, and then exhaling and relaxing the shoulders. Noticing the connection that you're making to the floor or to your seat, and allowing that to be a reminder of the present moment, being here in this space, and letting go of whatever just happened or whatever will happen, as you bring all of your senses to this moment, the moment of the breath, the moment of connection. So that's a space that you can come back to at any point during this conversation. If things become uncomfortable, sit with the discomfort. I urge you to write if that's a good place for you to be during the conversation, if speaking is not your favorite medium. And I love Erica's use the chat, use the chat. Be part of the conversation in some way. And I'm going to now pass this back to Erica.
All right. So, being that we're in a charged time, Election Day is next Tuesday, and there is early voting through Sunday, November 1st. Today, it's open until 8. Tomorrow is 9 to 5. And Saturday, Sunday, just so you know, it's 10 to 3. And that's at the Andy Murphy Midtown Center if you happen to be in Kingston. But if you just Google election Ulster County, then it's usually the first or the second site, and you'll be able to see where the other polling places are in Ulster County to vote, or in your own county if you happen to not be from Kingston. So we're gonna take a start. We're gonna take a start by taking a Zoom poll. I've had a very long day, and the poll is going to be asking, have you already voted by absentee ballot or in person? Do you plan to vote early and in person? Do you plan to vote on election day? Or do you not yet have a plan to vote? I love it. I just had someone who was in my kitchen right before we came on, and he said that it took him 10 minutes to stand in line at the Andy Murphy Midtown Center to vote this evening. I have a feeling as we get closer, it's probably, I don't know. I feel like it's going to get more packed, but it seems that the lines have begun to dwindle, but it might be because it's the week.
I hope so, because the waits have been really long. I was doing voter turnout calls last night, and people were reporting 3 hours. So if they're early for early voting.
Yeah, I might actually, I think I'm gonna swing by after this. Half an hour in Rhinebeck this afternoon,
Yeah.
Lori says. Thanks, Lori, for sharing that.
Yeah.
So our poll is in. We've got 53% of folks have already voted early and in person. I love that. 35% of folks have already voted by absentee ballot. We've got a two-way tie for planning to vote in person early and on election day. So just happy that folks are voting. Half hour new pulse at 4 o'clock, Rachel says. The scanners weren't working yesterday at the Midtown Center. Oh, fun. Well, I think that they have gotten that taken care of since the person I just talked to, one moment he said he was in line, the next moment he said he had voted. So that's huge and amazing. So I hope that everyone takes their right to vote to the polls.
Agreed.
I'm going to pass it off to Kathy for
All right. Next thing, we're going to have a temperature check. So just enter your temperature in the chat if you're comfortable. A 1 is like, this is terrible. My temperature is off. Worst day ever. A 10 is like, this is awesome. Best day. Feeling great. Go ahead and give us your temperature somewhere in the chat. How are folks doing? 6.5, 7, 7.5, an 8. We've got another 8, a 7-ish, 8-ish. All right, people are doing okay. Oh, a 5, sorry, an 8, a 7. All right. Physical temperature feels very cold. Yes, it is cold. Amanda's all bundled up. And I will know how I'm doing after the election is over. Amen. Woo. Turn up the heat, Amanda. And another amen. 8.5, 7.5, or a T.5. Is that a 0.5 temperature? Yikes. All right. And I think Amy, let's move it on to you.
Yeah, so we've told you a little bit about us, and before we begin our community discussion tonight, we would just ask that you tell us your name and what brought you here tonight. If you're comfortable just entering a little something about yourself and who you are, we would appreciate that.
Oh, we've got a 9 temperature coming in as well.
It's impressive.
Feeling really good. Yeah.
And the 8. All right. So we have Lisa here.
Lisa.
Or Lissa, maybe? I don't know.
Lisa. Yeah, I think Lisa, you might be right. It's that teacher thing, Miss Letty. I always rely on you to pronounce people's names correctly.
I just guess well.
And then you have to get really humble, right? And accept your oops. There's the oops or the ouch for the person whose name we mispronounce.
Moira, and so glad to find another community to learn and practice anti-racism with. We're glad to have you here, Moira. Erica Brown is here. What is that about? Cruising in from Kingston, lots of running around today. Yes, happy to be here with this amazing group of folks who have been holding and carrying this work forward. Thank you very much, Erica. Shaniqua did not want to miss this last opportunity for discussion. We are glad you're here. Kathy from UUCC read the book also for our racial justice working group. Thank you. I'm Lori, and I'm here to educate myself and learn about others' points of views. Thank you. Amanda and Anthony, owners of 2 businesses here in Kingston and residents of Uptown, looking forward to getting more involved in local activism, and thank you very much for all your help and support. Erica Brown to everybody, happy to see you again today, Shaniqua, this time not running around, haha. And welcome to all the UUCC folks. Thanks for being such a big part of this. Rachel just wants to learn and listen. Lissa, yes, as in Melissa, there we go. Really enjoying these discussions and being with interesting people. Thank you. Fatima, curious to know how people see these topics in the last discussion. Sorry, can't stay the whole time, but glad to be here before my conference call. We are glad you're here. Donna, not enough sleep last night, I hear you, but here because I'm drawn to this workbook Voices, so grateful to be here. Yes, the UU Catskills group will continue to work on anti-racism. Jane Meek says, hi, I'm Jane, looking to move to Kingston from Jersey City in April with my wife. Came to learn and see who in Kingston is committed to anti-racism in my future community. Thanks, y'all.
Right.
Thank you. Nice. All right. Oh. We got Dina. I'm Dina, a writer and professor at U Chicago from Socrates. I'm striving to lead an actively anti-racist life and creative writing classroom and to help leave this world a safer, more equitable, and more loving place than how I found it and continue to find it. Thanks for holding this space. Thank you. B. Sarah to everybody living in Energy Square. I heard Kendi once at Bard and once at a place called Grace Farms in Connecticut. Dynamite. Yes, I'd love to have seen him live. He is a pretty dynamite speaker.
Some crew, huh?
Yeah.
Got an amazing group tonight. I love it.
All right. Should we move into the discussion?
Yeah,
Good.
let's
Yeah.
do it.
Yep.
All right. So question number 1. Kendi writes, white supremacist is code for anti-human, a nuclear ideology that poses an existential threat to human existence. How are white supremacists and their ideology actually harmful to all of humanity, including white people? Oh, that's right. I always forget that I have to see who's got their hands up. Feel free, folks, to jump in.
In the
How
chat,
white
we've got
supremacists-
Dina in the chat saying nobody's free until everyone is free.
Love that
Mhm.
one.
So while we're waiting, I love this question, by the way. And I think, when we look at simple things, when we look at complex things like climate change, right? This is a product of white supremacy. How does the climate not hurt white people, right? So part of the idea of taking over the environment and controlling things with industry, we harm the environment for all people. So white people are harmed by the lack of attention to care around the environment. If the Affordable Health Care Act goes away, white people will be hurt. That is a part of white supremacy, right? So those are just 2 examples right there.
And we have a request for the question to be repeated. So
Sure,
it says,
yeah.
oh, go ahead, Erica.
Oh, yeah, I forgot that some people, if they're calling in, they might not be able to see the slides. So white supremacist is code for anti-human, a nuclear ideology that poses an existential threat to human existence. How are white supremacists and their ideology actually harmful to all of humanity, including white people? Let's see, Donna says, Kendi talks about racism being about power constructs, not social constructs. White supremacists are about hanging on to their power. And Charlotte said the rest. Yeah. My apologies for delay. Hi, Lisa. No need for apologies. Hard to summarize quickly, but I work for a musician community self-identified as the
Something.
Jaisalmer Marasi in India, who deal with the ongoing devastations of caste. I'm so happy I got it right, Lisa. Thanks. Here to learn from our US-based anti-racist leaders and share with the rising leaders of the Marasi community.
Yes.
Yeah, I think, so we're waiting for people. I think it's really hard, we're so used to looking at white supremacy as damaging the Black and Brown and Indigenous community, right? And yet, I think Kendi argues very powerfully to, for those people who aren't coming along with the idea, who don't believe in the idea of anti-racism, that we need to appeal to their sense of self-preservation, right? How is this good for you? And he speaks about self-interest. And so if people don't come to this work with their hearts, right? Maybe we capture their minds with concepts like, what about healthcare? What about the climate? What about education? The policies that harm Black and Brown people and Indigenous people are harmful to the majority of white people too. They are not useful. I don't know how we get caught up. But one example is the Confederacy, right? How many white men, women, and children died as the result of the Civil War? They were murdered by Confederate soldiers with the idea that they wanted to protect the institution of slavery. If that isn't harmful to white people, I mean, it's kind of crazy, right? That people support that ideology and it's part of white supremacy, or the supporting the Nazis, right? And Nazi ideology. You know, most of the people who died were white. So it's kind of a crazy concept to continue to protect white supremacy.
Leslie has her hand
Yeah,
up.
well, basically can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Basically, the white supremacists see blacks as subhuman. And basically Kendi says in order to become an anti-racist society, this prevents, everyone has to be on an equal par. All races have to be recognized as equal. So that it prevents people seeing all races as equal, and it becomes very dangerous.
We've got in the chat from Jane, white supremacy is a theory of genocide. And then from Shaniqua, people are shortchanging their lives. We were meant to be in relationship with all beings, plants included, but this segregated way of living is not as fulfilling and full and diverse as it should be. And then I just said, yes, Shaniqua.
I agree.
I was thinking.
But the challenge is, I think the challenge for all of us doing this work, though, is that how do we then bring in those people who don't get that, right? That's the issue. And I think that's why Kendi brings the idea of self-interest up, because if we can't appeal to their hearts, maybe we appeal to their pocketbooks, maybe we appeal to their minds. It's a real challenge. But the good news is that the majority of, there was a Monmouth poll in June, and I think 3 out of 4 Americans now recognize racism as a serious problem in this country. We've never seen that before. There's still 25% that haven't come on board, which is still shocking, but
Yeah. And, white supremacy, it's such a charged word for people to be able to feel like they can wrap their head around and then have to accept for themselves. It is so deeply ingrained in ways that I have only become aware of over the last few weeks, really, just how little, just how ignorant folks can be. And I use the word ignorant when I use that word just based on its definition. It is not to judge anyone. It is a word in the human language. And I know that it comes off offensive, but I think also kind of reducing the charge on even the word ignorance is very helpful for moving forward and kind of just releasing the ego to get to these places where we can really speak candidly, openly, and in a way just constructively. Yeah, because holding on to ego a lot of the times holds us all back. I want to jump into Mariah. I'm not going to actually jump to Mariah. I see Rachel was trying to. Rachel figured out how to raise her hand. Rachel, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, my audio is working today. So whoever told me how to do that, thank you.
Karen.
Karen, thank you. I think everybody said it, but I just want to say it in a different way, because I think just like that whole chapter on definitions is so important. Like the repetition is important too, and saying things in different ways, in different language. And I just think that it's so clean and clear to me that anytime there is an ideology where someone is better and someone is lesser than, that everybody's humanity is shortchanged, and that the person who's putting all that investment in trying to put themselves on top, their humanity is even, I mean, I would argue even more shortchanged in some ways, because when you're in that position of putting other people down, your humanity is broken. Your fundamental, just basic goodness as a person is broken. And I just think that's so basic. And even, you know, that beginning chapter of defining like what's behind segregationist ideas, what's behind assimilationist ideas, like that all of those things underneath that is still that underpinning of that some are better and some are lesser. And, you know, I also have a question for the group. And, you know, we're talking about race, and I wonder, is it offensive to draw other analogies, like in terms of gender? And, you know, like, I mean, I know that I've been in situations where people have tried to make analogies to like, well, I've experienced sexism. So, you know, and I'm not talking about that, or I'm sort of talking about that. But I guess in terms of this question, the thing that comes to mind is, you know, the patriarchy in general, right? And like in my experience, I just in my lived experience, I feel like men in general, I'm mostly white men who I've encountered, that their humanity is so basically shortchanged by having to be in this dominant mindset all the time. And my question, I guess, to the group is that even, is it an offensive thing to kind of bring those analogies in, you know, when we're talking about power, but to bring it away from race? I'm just curious about that. Anyway.
I think that I've personally used it as a helpful tool to bring people towards race, particularly with white women, and for the reasons that you're talking about. When I have conversations and feel like they're missing the mark, or we can't connect those dots, it seems to help to be able to do that. And drawing those parallels sometimes enables people to get there in a way that maybe they couldn't before. That's what I found in my experience.
I'd like to add, this is a tricky one. This is a very tricky one, and it's going to matter who you're talking to. It's in the relationship that you have with whomever that is definitely going to matter, because some people do not want the parallels drawn because they feel, I'm not giving away how I feel, they feel that they're so dissimilar, or dissimilar enough, I guess, or by drawing the parallel, you're just lumping a bunch of other things together, and then we're not able to tackle the one challenge, which right here is anti-racism. So I would just, Rachel, advise you to just know who you're talking to, and just try to, as safely as possible, navigate that conversation. Because as Amy said, there are some people who they need that parallel drawn, and then there are some other people I do know who would be offended if parallels are brought up.
And I think that gets to the point where Rachel's last statement was and it brings people away from race, and that's where I think that, you know, offensive piece can definitely come in. But as Amy said, if you can use it adeptly, depending on who you're speaking to and how well you know them, to bring them towards race, that's a very different thing.
It's like a Chinese finger trap. Yeah. I know that we have more questions to get to, so I want to just address what's in the chat. Mariah says, I think the book mentioned not stressing about changing minds, but focus on changing policies. The minds will change later. It's all about changing hearts and minds. But yeah, 100%. I think they're all simultaneously working together. Yeah. I almost read click on the participants icon. That is White supremacists do not see the political or economic conditions as a problem, but rather see others as problems. They do not also do not see racism as a problem because they don't admit to it. Sure, there's a lot of blame placing, but I think that that is attributed to having to address what's happening in yourself and growing as a human. It takes a lot of energy to grow as human beings. Dina says, white supremacists have hatred in their hearts, whether they know it or not. It is a lethal poison that infects everyone who comes into contact with it. Yeah, and unfortunately, some people don't know that they're spreading that poison. Rachel, loved everyone's humanity is shortchanged. Fatima says, I will leave everyone with this quote as I have to hop on my conference call. I hope Fatima's still with us. Here's my comment on white supremacy. It's summed up in this quote from Jane Elliott, who did groundbreaking work decades ago with school children with her blue eyes versus brown eyes experiment. She said, prejudice is an emotional commitment to ignorance. Thank you for organizing these talks. I hope you select another book on racism, but I hope it's not white fragility, since I think it's ipso facto white fragility for a white woman to write about white fragility, and then for that book to outsell books by writers of color. Again, thank you for promoting these talks. Thanks, Fatima. Shaniqua says, yes, Rachel, on the white men. That's why women should be running the world, but some women can be even worse. All right. Okay, Shaniqua, I love you so much. It's important to note the similarities, but also the major differences, I assume, between gender and race. I feel like I read it, but didn't read it. It's important to note the similarities, but also the major differences. Absolutely. I think that the strength is in our differences, is what we're realizing. The more we know about folks, the more we can expand our own minds and experiences and points of view. I especially appreciated Kendi's linking of racism and capitalism. Yeah, we talked about that, I think, in the last session. I don't know what, is it Sarah? I don't know. I'm not going to call you B, but anyway. And then finally, I know we're way over time on this one. Dina says, it is a gesture toward intersectionality, but it can also take critical space and light away from the issue at hand. It would help to preface such a comparison with the self-awareness that it could function as a diversion or even a bait and switch kind of tactic. And Shaniqua says, we've been trained that the behavior of white supremacists is okay. Woo, y'all were on fire for this question.
Wow.
I feel like this, we could have, that could have been the whole hour and 15 minutes. But, thank you so much for all of your participation. I know I keep looking over here, but that's where I can see you, and this is where I have my notes. So I'm going to pass it off to Kathy for question number 2.
And question number 2 is kind of related to this, but it says, Kendi makes the case that to be anti-racist, one must stand against all forms of bigotry. Why is standing against other bigotries so essential to standing up to racism?
I see that Donna still had her hand up. I don't know if you want to speak to that or to the last question, Donna. Or did your hand go down now?
No, Donna's hand is still up, but you are muted, Donna.
Okay, sorry, it was the last question. I was just really going to say quickly that when people bring up other areas of problem, to me as a white person, I feel like it's deflection, and I feel it draws away a lot of energy from the real issue of racism, which is so overriding for so many things. I mean, so that's all I wanted to say, that personally, I get offended when people say, oh yeah, well, I've experienced sexism, or I'm Jewish, I've experienced a lot of, anti-Semitism. Yeah, those things are real and they hurt and they're profound. But to me, nothing touches racism. Nothing. Sorry.
No apologies necessary.
Love to jump in momentarily here. So this is a conversation in a lot of around Black Lives Matter, because people are saying Black Lives Matter, but there are queer Black lives. There are Black lives who, who are able, I feel like I ran into this last time, who don't have certain abilities. There's just all of these different forms of bigotry where Black lives still matter, and there are folks who discriminate. And until we really address that, if we're going to say that Black Lives Matter and we want to address anti-racism, you have to like basically address all forms of bigotry, because there are so many different folks, different types of folks that fall under the umbrella of Black. And, you know, you can't just choose one type of a Black person to support the life of.
I also, I think, hi everyone, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm Amanda. I'm not officially one of the moderators, but I'm here with Rough Draft and just myself too. But I think for the second question, it's a matter of accountability too, right? Because if you are standing up against racism, but people see you putting down gay people or people of a certain class or, you know, anything else, how can they take you seriously, and how can they you know, learn from one type of defense that you have when you're really kind of not showing that in all areas. So I think that that's important too.
I always think, Amanda, of that quote from Martin Niemöller, the Lutheran pastor who said during World War I, right, first they came for the socialists and I didn't speak out because I was not a socialist. And then they came for the trade unionists and, you know, and then at the end, like, you know, then they came for me and there was no one left to speak for me. So I think that unless we're speaking for all humans, right, when we, you know, and that to me is, so if you're professing, yeah, I mean, if you're claiming that you're anti-racist, you need to examine how bigotry shows up in every area of your life, or you're not being true to the spirit of it.
In the chat, we have Dina saying that all forms of bigotry are connected. For example, the gender binary began as a racial construct. Check out the book Manliness and Civilization by Gail Baderman for more info. In sum, eugenic scientists and policymakers in the early 20th century used the rhetoric of civilization/civilized people to naturalize patriarchy and white supremacy. It's the same rhetoric that oppresses non-binary and LGBTQ plus folks.
Hmm. Yeah.
And then we have Donna and Erica saying, thank you and my pleasure. And yes, Amanda, I honestly hadn't thought of that, says Erica. Anybody else on this particular question? If we allow any form of bigotry, we just continue the system, right? I mean, we will just then continue a power system to just substitute a different person on top than had been on the top before, and continuing those systems of power.
And I think too that when we break off like that, we fracture movements, right? I mean, I think that that's what happened to the Black Power movement in the 60s and 70s. There was a split in terms of there was a gender issue, there was a queer issue, you know, Black men separated themselves and weren't sensitive to the women of the movement. Gays and lesbians weren't part of the movement. We've seen it with the women's movement, right? Splitting off in terms of, again, you know, race and sexual orientation, and all of that splits apart these fabulous movements. So we need to identify where that happens and not let it stop our forward motion.
Should we move on to the next question? I think that's you, Charlotte.
That's me. Okay, so in closing, Kendi closes the book comparing racism and cancer. So what do you all think of that comparison, racism and cancer? How do they connect, or do they connect for you as a useful analogy?
We've got some hands up, Charlotte.
Ah, thank you. So let's see. All right. Is it Moria?
Mariah.
Mariah. Thank you, Mariah.
I said your name wrong before.
Hey.
Guys.
I loved his analogy, but my brain was having a little bit of a hard time with it, just because like we all, hopefully are lucky enough to know people who have overcome cancer. His story, he beat it, which is awesome. We haven't beaten racism yet. And that's the tough part about I almost kind of want that, I know a guy that knows a guy, that beat racism, to help that be a helpful analogy. So that was just, I was kind of stuck with that.
Right, right. And yeah, because, right, who has the answer yet, right? We don't have anybody who says, I've successfully done this. We have from Lissa, loved it. I think that's from something that has to be eradicated or taken out of society. Yeah, right, like tumor removal. And then Amanda has posted the question. Donna, invasive cancer. Some of us have overcome their cancer. This may be curable too, but is a long fight ahead. His point is that it invades every part of our culture. Yeah, brilliant, right? It does, gets right in there. Leslie has her hand up. Go ahead, Leslie.
I think we have to go back to where he was at that point. He had finished reading Stamped and his wife came down with cancer. And that was the seed to this book. So he's total, he says he's total, I don't know whether it was in an interview I heard or the book itself, but he was just, those were the two things that were totally occupying his life, his mind at that point. And so that's where he was coming from. And I think his analogies are very effective. And as he says, he's looking for a cure for both, because he has the kind of cancer, unfortunately, that he's in remission right now, but has a very high prospect of coming back. And I think he wants to get this racist, the anti-racist society going, or at least people admitting that it can be done, because he feels that if people don't feel that there is a possibility, that it'll never happen. In the same way, surviving cancer, you need to feel it's a possibility that you can do it. Otherwise, your attitude is going to be such that you probably won't.
Thank you, Leslie. Yeah, I mean, faith, having some kind of faith that something can happen out of this, even if you're not attached to it. You can't be attached to a specific outcome, because I think, as Maura said, what example do we have of total success? But you need to stay open to the possibility. Donna writes about hope, which we're going to get to, Donna. We are going to get to that in our fourth question. And Jane writes, good comparison in terms that once you find a healing balm, then you have to change so much about your lifestyle to stay healthy. Diet, exercise, mindset, stress management, work, life balance. Absolutely, right? It's a holistic approach. How do you eradicate it? Racism exists in all of our institutions, in our relationships, in our neighborhoods, in our social interactions. It is all there. And then Shaniqua says, nice, Leslie. And Donna, good job, Leslie. Anybody else want to speak to this question? Yeah, go for it, Amanda.
I think another reason one reason it's a good analogy is we had a question a couple sessions ago that was, why is it so important to call out racism and to name it when you see it? And I think someone then even, answered the question as to say, you can't start to diagnose and treat cancer until it's diagnosed. You can't start to treat a medical condition until it has a name and it has a description. And so I know that, racism is being discussed more and more as a public health issue. And I think that that's the way we kind of have to treat it for it to be taken seriously and for us to start putting solutions in place.
Beautifully put. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And think about the opposite of that, right? So and Kendi himself was in denial, right? He ignored the symptoms and he ends up with stage 4. And we do that, right? Sometimes we wonder, how do people live with racism, well, if you're in denial, you don't even know that your body and your mind are under attack, right? Until it's too late, or maybe not, we hope. Thank you. I think that's it. I don't see any other hands, and I'm just checking the chat. So I think we can move on to question number 4, Amy.
Okay. Kendi believes that we can defy the odds, heal society of racism, and create an anti-racist society. Do you? Why is hope so central to the anti-racist movement?
Well, I'll go back to the conversation we had on Radio Kingston the other day when those of us who are working with young people see a lot of hope, and that the young folks around us have a lot of hope and a lot of anger, and are working to change things, make a different world for themselves. And I think that without that, why would we continue? So that's one of the reasons why I think it's so important.
Donna says hope has been central to every movement. And Mariah said, because it would be way too depressing without it. Agreed. Alyssa said, doesn't hope have to be a part of any type of change? I would agree with you and Kendi on that. Dina said, yes, we can with the right leadership.
Yeah, I want to speak to with the right leadership. I hope that everyone feels empowered to really activate the leader in themselves. We're all leaders, and there's all. I'm not making an assumption that this is what you are thinking, Dina. But there seems to be a lot of like, well, if we have this person in power, then we'll all be good. But that happened. It seemed to me in my experiences that had happened when Obama was president. And when in 2016, when Trump was elected, I had lots of friends of not people of color, because we know it. People that were just like, I didn't know that racism was so rampant. And I'm like, that's hilarious. How did you not know that? But just want to speak to just everyone having that leader activated in themselves. I do think that it's possible. It's going to take a ton of energy and a lot of intention. Like as we all know, to be anti-racist is an action, and it means calling it out, and it means kind of not sleeping. Means really just around the clock, just making sure you address it. And yeah, I think it's possible. The cynic in me is just like wants to say it's not possible, but really, if you're looking at like probabilities, it's a very low probability. But I think that we can make it a larger number, that it's probable that it's something that we can do. We have to believe in ourselves though, and be really active.
So I saw a lot pop up in the chat. Amanda asked people to, reconsider that first part of the question. Do you think it's possible? That's what Erica was just speaking to. Lisa said she's not sure. Jane said the squad gives me hope. B. Sarah said soon enough we'll all be dark. Amanda, yes, Dina, that's a great point. Can somebody help me out with the comments that came before that? I think I missed.
Said, we might not be able to change racism in the hearts of every American, but we can and should dismantle systemic racism. I think that's all that you missed. Yep.
We have a bunch of hands up.
Hands up, we do. So, Donna?
Oh, I was just looking for the button to take mine down because I didn't realize there were lots up, but I'm 71. I won't see it in my lifetime, but I also am so aware. I love the part when you were talking about the young people and their motivation and stuff. And I love that. It gives me hope. But I also feel like we're having conversations we have just never, ever, ever, ever had before. And they're broad. I mean, and they're going on. And while there may only be 20 some odd people this time as opposed to the 80 the first time, people are still working and they're reading and they're plugging away. And, you know, my faith community has just, we're determined to reshape ourselves and really live into our faith and in terms of racism work. I mean, those conversations are happening in broad communities. And so that gives me hope. Maybe not my lifetime, but hope.
As we said, hope is central. Lori, I see you have your hand up also.
Hi. One of the main points I got out of the book was that what we need is anti-racist policy, and that I think he was talking about whether, you know, people aren't born racist, right? But then there's been this thought that hate develops, right? And then we get this racist society. And so he said, no, it's racist policy is put in place, and then you get racist. So to me, then if we can dismantle the racist policy, put anti-racist policies in place, then we should get anti-racist by the same token. So to me that, you know, so just like thinking logically, that says to me, yes, it should be possible.
And there's hope in that, right? With the right people in the right positions and all of us doing our part to get them there and then to follow through. Hope is the ever-burning ember, even when the outlook is bleakest. From my amateur understanding, hope, ongoing education, and laws passed will play a massive role in the wide societal change. Yes, if we can, it will take generations.
Mm-hmm.
Rachel has her hand up.
Hi, I'm disclaimer to be incoherent and rambling. So I mean, I just think that, again, back to like basic humanity 101, like to be human is to be aspirational. And and I love what Donna said about, you know, bringing the spiritual into this. I mean, it is fundamentally, I think, a spiritual project to believe in what rationally, materially you don't necessarily see around you, and to keep that somehow in the face of, you know, and all the inspiring stories of people who've made change and are people who believe in what seems impossible. So I think that I just even love that word, aspirational, you know, because it points to like the hugeness of such a task. And I mean, do I think it's possible to have an anti-racist society? I believe in healing. I believe that humans want to heal. I believe that humans incline towards healing. And again, I think that's also, it's a spiritual fire. But at the same time, my mind is like living in this purple county, living with a neighbor literally who lives next door to me, who has, you know, Trump flags and Blue Lives Matter flags flying from the house that I actually live in. And, you know, just like Kathy said, like, I mean, our students in Kingston, like seeing the amazing fire of justice in them and the but also seeing the kids who have totally different points of view. And it just, I don't know, you know, I'm seeing how this, you know, in this moment of like, we're still doing this, where half the population, or people who vote at least, are voting, you know, potentially voting this person who we've had the last 4 years. I mean, so it's just, I don't know. There's both of those things. There's this hopelessness based on the materiality of what I see, and then there's this belief in what almost seems like a fairy tale. But I do believe it anyway because I need to.
Yeah. So here's a hopeful fact. And this was something that Kendi published in The Atlantic this summer, that from May 25th to August 25th of this year, there were at least 7,750 anti-racist demonstrations in 2,400 locations across all 50 states and DC. So by Independence Day, by the 4th of July, I love this, as many as 26 million had participated in demonstrations, and the anti-racist movement, this current movement, has been recognized as the largest movement of any kind in American history. So I think that's really powerful to know that the momentum is there. This is bigger than any other anti-racist movement in history. So we're there, that's hope, right? That's real. Those are numbers.
That is hope. I want to speak. I don't want to okay. So I had listened to a podcast that was talking about how a lot of social justice movements throughout history have come out of a pandemic. And, you know, there are also people that are paying attention to the fact that the numbers of folks who are showing up are dwindling. There's also the idea of folks who showed up, and I don't think that people were ill-intentioned. It's just, you know, some of it was performative. Lots of social media, and just like, look at me marching right now. So I think that we need to be careful to make sure that our intentions are grounded from a place of like really wanting to, as Rachel said, heal humanity and heal one another. Because showing up because you know a group of folks are going to show up is not going to be helpful. We need folks to show up, and that's not only demonstrations, that's in, like I said, in any moment that you sense racism. It's just like show up and like try to and question it, like bring it up. I know it will make you feel uncomfortable to question someone's actions, reactions, or behaviors, but I mean, what else? The other option is to be silent, and you know, what is it? Silence is violence or something. My cats are going crazy right now.
Leslie's had her hand up for a while. Leslie?
Yes, I just want to, Leslie, I see you and we're coming there. I just want to make sure that we honor the people that have also had comments up in the chat for a bit. So Jane mentioned the Green New Deal needs to get nationwide support, and we must continue to make big moves away from capitalism. You know, we talked a little bit about racism and capitalism and how Kendi talks about them as conjoined twins. And so I appreciate you bringing that back up, Jane, that we can't necessarily talk about one without the other, or exploring that relationship. And then there was a great exchange where Donna said she just realized what a white privilege comment she made, saying that we have never had these conversations before. I meant to say that we white people never have. BIPOC people have certainly talked about how racist our society is. So then Erica appreciated that acknowledgement and made note of how words are so important, and the fact that folks, I'm back. The fact that folks are working to be more intentional with their words and action have stoked my enthusiasm and hope. So I really appreciated both of you in that, and think it's really important that we acknowledge that. And Charlotte, thanks for sharing that heartening data. So Leslie.
I'm hopeful, and I'm also hopeful because I think I mentioned this last time, there's a book by Isabel Wilkinson that came out this year that Oprah has made it her book of the year or book of the month, but when she describes it, she says this is the book that all humanity should be reading, and that I feel will make people. The book is called Caste, and the difference between Kendi and Wilkinson is that she doesn't use the word racism at all because she feels that it's too colored with hatred and things like that. Where when she says that the Blacks have become a caste and the lowest caste on the hierarchy in the United States, she feels once this is recognized that then there will be and recognizing how it's hurting everybody to even have a caste that's discriminated against. She compares it to the Indian Dalits, who are the untouchables. She compared it to the Jews in Nazi Germany. And the fact that Oprah's calling attention in her book club, I'm happy to hear that more and more people, not only the protesters, will actually be sitting down and discussing what's been the wrongs that have been done, with the hopefulness that everyone will see that caste shouldn't exist, which means racism won't exist, but it just won't be called that. If people don't want to read the 400-page book, there's also a video which was done at the New York Public Library, in which she's interviewed for the book. And it really describes the book, and it gives you a flavor. And being interested in anti-racism, you should be interested in anti-caste. And I would suggest the video as a starter. New York Public Library, it was done 2 months ago. It's a discussion with John Dickerson. And thank you all for doing this.
Thank you, Leslie. And Amanda did share the information about that book in our chat. And I don't see any more hands. Any last thoughts about that question? Why is hope so central?
I think we have a hand. Lori.
I'm sorry, my computer is just acting up tonight.
Oh, I just put my hand up. Just one last thought on hope that I heard today from Heather Cox Richardson, an American historian that I follow. She said, she actually asked a question. She said, what percentage of people do you think it takes to affect change? And does anybody want to throw out a guess in the chat?
I think it's 1%.
Yeah, well, she said, yeah, mostly people say, oh, 50%, 20%, right? Maybe she said it's 3.5%. So to me, that's encouraging. That seems like that's an achievable amount to get, and then to actually make change.
That doesn't seem like an impediment, right? 3.5%. Yeah. Thank you for that. So I think we were gonna, before we end, I think we were just gonna do a very short round of what we're all planning to do next, the moderators in terms.
There's something in the chat that I think is important.
Oh, okay.
I have an ouch. Why say blacks and not black people? I have never heard anyone say whites to describe white people. It seems like turning such an adjective into a noun reduces a person to their skin color. I hear you, Dina. I feel the same way, and that definitely hits my ear the wrong way when people do that and don't say black people. I have heard people say whites as well, but it's not the same. I hear you. I hear you. Thank you for bringing that up.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I think we all struggle with language sometimes, and it's really good to be in this situation and hear ourselves and hear others and to be open to that. So thank you. So I think since this is our last night, just taking again, Kendi talks about, reading is fine, changing hearts and minds, but what are we going to do next? And I love that Erica said, yeah, the protests have dwindled and people aren't showing up. We hope they're doing work. And so maybe some of us want to throw out, what are we doing now? What are we doing in our life that's actually moving this, this momentum forward? Are we pushing ourselves forward? How do we plan to continue the work of anti-racism in our own personal lives? So it can be anybody, it doesn't have to be the moderators, but it can be anybody. Want to throw that out? What are you doing now? Besides reading a book, it's good to read a book. All for that.
Number one is voting.
Yeah.
Go TV.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, voting. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been trying to ask folks around me what kind of support they need. And like there are little pockets of people who are bubbling up, and it's just like whenever I'm in a group text message, it's just like, hey, like what do you need? What do you need? And there are folks who I try to do as much as I can, which I still don't think is enough, just always working to do more. But seeking out that information, I know it's really difficult to find information sometimes because it's really not, especially in Kingston, like really aggregated anywhere. Yes, the Black Lives Matter Wednesday afternoon demonstrations. I see that. Thank you, Sarah. And geez, I don't even know where to begin. I'm happy if we'll share out my email address. It's literally my job to try to know a lot about what's going on, but what's a really helpful tool for me is Google Alerts. You can, if you have Gmail, you can sign up for, I don't even know if you need Gmail. You sign up for Google Alerts and you type in certain keywords. So like Black Lives Matter or anti-racism, Kingston, New York. And anytime an alert comes through, any news within a certain area, it will give you an alert about what's going on. So that's been really, really helpful for just knowing what's up. And yes, Karen, thank you for adding those. A lot of those organizations are doing incredible work, but I work at Radio Kingston, so I would I hope that you would tune into some of our radio shows, and definitely check out our Facebook page. It's my job to try to share as much as I can possibly share without flooding Facebook. So that's a resource I would like to offer, but like just doing it and doing more, because we are all capable of doing a lot more than I think we assume that we're capable of doing. And I remember being this person 5 years ago, just being like, but I'm too tired to do anything. And in hindsight, it's just like, that person was like, I feel like I am, that person was 1% of who I am today. So just had a little bit of faith in myself, had some faith, had other people put faith in me, and just doing, taking a nap and then going out and doing more.
And Mariah writes in the chat that she's been bringing an anti-racism framework to work, to her preschools. I love that. Preschools, plural preschools. Holding elected officials accountable. Yeah, to make policy changes. Catherine, good point. We're going to elect people next week, and we hope that they're going to be accountable. We're going to hold them accountable. And Kendi says that too. It's not just electing people, but watching what they do. We vote them out, right? So that brings us to our closing, which is sort of segues into this anyway. We started on the different organizations, but so Kathy, we kind of cut into your discussion there. But why don't you take that up?
Sure. And there's a few more things in the chat about the Green New Deal could truly transform so many racist policies. Absolutely true. I have bought the Green New Deal shirts and just wearing them around the city, raising awareness. Amanda says, pledging to start these difficult conversations I've never had the courage to start before. Yes. With friends, with family, even customers at the business, which is awesome because a lot of people wouldn't put themselves out there like that, but the work is that important. So when you see or hear something that doesn't sit right, bring it up in person, not just on social media. I have not read the book Cast yet without knowing enough. My first concern is that it's a sensational use of a term that doesn't put the full attention on the millions of people born into Dalits and OBCs, which is other backwards castes. But I should also read it and make an educated opinion on it. I haven't read it either. Protesting, supporting Black businesses, and sharing resources to support Black artists, assigning books by BIPOC authors in the classroom, and leading this conversation at every opportunity. Also reading and celebrating BIPOC perspectives, primarily educating young white people on the importance of this work. All that stuff. So we talked about voting. Definitely vote by Tuesday, please. Support candidates who are committed to the anti-racist work. Apparently there are phone banking opportunities. It's still not too late to get out the word on voting. There are numerous organizations working on this effort, including Indivisible and New York 19. You can contact Lynn at LIN at Indivisible New York 19 at something.com. It's up there on the screen now. And yeah, I think that just about covers everything I was supposed to say. Erica, we did some of the stuff you're talking about there too. The email is in the chat now.
Cool. And as far as I know, Ann Ames, who is one of the co-planners
Here it is.
for Wednesday Walks for Black Lives in Kingston, said that they're going to try to carry on until they can't, until it's too cold, or until, you know, they want to just keep on pushing it. They do understand that daylight savings time is Sunday, and it will be dark out when they start marching, but they're asking folks to bring candles, lights, flashlights, headlamps. But there is a Wednesday Walk for Black Lives November 4th. It's going to be very interesting to see how that goes after the election, even though we will likely not have a presidential, we're not going to have a presidential,
A winner.
not going to have a winner. Yeah, thank you so much. But that is going to be this upcoming Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. Oh, I'm not done. I thought I just finished like I was finished. I can't right now. And we also want you to continue to support Black-owned businesses in your community. As we learned from one of our participants last time, if you purchase through Etsy, you can also search for Black-owned shops. There are 10,653 choices. And if you're on Etsy, you can even narrow it down to location. So you can even check in the Hudson Valley for Black-owned shops. And just thank you. I just want to throw out a huge thank you to everyone here for allowing me to be here. And I'm going to pass it off to Charlotte.
All right. So basically, yeah, we hope that you will keep reading. You know, I am a former librarian. I will always be a librarian. So of course, books, you know, I've got 20 of them on my night table. So keep reading, keep learning, keep educating yourself. We've got a list of suggested books on our Kingston Reads website. Please stop into Rough Draft or any of your local independently owned bookstores if you're not in Kingston, and ask your local booksellers what they would recommend. I know that Amanda and Anthony have a tremendous table always of incredible anti-racist books. So that would be my first stop. And then we want to thank all of you. And our community discussions would not be possible without the technical wizardry of Karen Levine. So thank you, Karen.
So we just also want to end by saying we love hearing from you all, and your participation has obviously been key to this whole process. And we are interested in having any of you who would consider co-organizing or maybe co-facilitating another one of these series to reach out to us. So please contact us with questions or concerns or your interest in doing that at contact@kingstonreads.org. Again, that's contact@kingstonreads.org.
We have two things in the chat, Amy. Amanda, there's a new biography of Malcolm X out this week, The Dead Are Rising. And Lissa wants to know, where do we find the video of the last two discussions? So that is on our YouTube channel. And thank you, Karen, just put that in the chat. So the YouTube channel, the URL for that is on kingstonreads.org. So there's a link right to the YouTube channel. So please check it out. All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful evening and keep hope alive, right? Keep hope alive for Tuesday.
Yes.
Let's just get to Tuesday. Or as Erica said, it may not be Tuesday, maybe a while. So let's keep connected, keep caring for each other, keep healing, as Rachel said.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you.